So Dana White got announced to being the promoter behind Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Crawford. And although that in the boxing world that can be very exciting, I feel like for us UFC fans, it just makes it worse and worse. And potentially Dana White could be a reason why the UFC can be ruined. I'll explain that a bit more in my video, but before I do, if you guys can, please hit the subscribe button and let's shoot for 10 likes on this video. Anyways, let's get into it. So the UFC within the past year especially, it's not a secret that they have been really complacent, to be honest, especially with how they've organized their cards. I've kind of talked about how the Apex cards are just kind of a joke at this point. Made it in a different video about my problems with the UFC. So I don't want to talk about this too much, but really, the fact that we still have Apex cards in 2025 is just fucking ridiculous. Like, can we get out of the Apex and at least try to make a good card when you're in an arena so you can, at least make some money instead of saving it and throwing out a shit card for the fans to watch. Because slowly the UFC is going to start losing the casual fans, and that's what makes the bread and butter in honestly any sport. And yeah, and I feel like this goes into my next issue, which I feel like is not talked about too much, but the UFC, in my personal opinion, is very lazy about how they give their title shots. And a prime example is actually the past weekend with Marab and Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley, when he lost against Marab back in September in the Sphere, didn't fight ever since, just had surgeries. And to make the fight more interesting into the buildup, right, with having Sean O'Malley fight a couple of times at least before getting a Marab rematch, they decided to give him a Robbery rematch when Marab won by unanimous decision, and Sean O'Malley only defended the belt once. It's not like he defended the belt multiple times, lost it, and then just because of the reign that he had during that division, he automatically gets a rematch, like similar to like what Kamaru Usman did when he lost against Leon Edwards. Like that's a good example of when someone gets a rematch. Not Sean O'Malley. He only had one title defense. That's one, and that's the one part of the UFC matchmaking where it's like, what is this that's going on? They're more worried about potentially making more money than what's actually right. And another frustration was when Dana White on the press conference just threw out the idea of, oh, you know what, I'm actually interested in seeing an Umar Nurmagomedov rematch. It's again the similar situation with Sean O'Malley. Sure, it was a bit closer than the Sean O'Malley fight, whatever, on the eye. But again, Marab won by unanimous decision. And Umar, there's a lot of people who do like Umar. If they throw him in against Marab, who's honestly the GOAT at 135, and he loses again, that's going to tank Umar's stock, just like Sean O'Malley this past weekend. And instead, what I feel like they should do, like they should have done with Sean O'Malley, give Umar a couple of matchups. Maybe, instead of Umar and a Marab rematch, maybe do a Umar Sean O'Malley. And then the winner of that, stays in that contention discussions for the UFC bantamweight belt. And then Umar fights another person one more time. And then you move on and fight Marab, right? Then it makes the fight more interesting. Oh, Umar has had very big, he's had two performances. Maybe in the Sean O'Malley fight, he looked better than Marab. How does this go now? Versus, oh, he hasn't fought ever since ever since the Marab fight, lost then, and then he gets a rematch all of a sudden. And it also ruins it for the people who actually deserve it, right? Peter Yan and Corey Sandhagen are two fighters, in my personal opinion, who definitely deserve a title shot. And to have Sean O'Malley and potentially Umar take it over, those two fighters is a bit disrespectful, in my opinion, with, who actually deserves to get the title shot versus, the UFC favorites at this point. It's getting ridiculous. And that's the big part of, how lazy this is. How this ties in with the Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Crawford fight with, the UFC's complacency issue, right? If you saw the recent news with UFC No Shape, which is happening in September, being a non-pay-per-view, that card isn't going to be fitting the hype of what No Shake cards generally supposed to be. And, him spending this time on, different areas or, different sports like power slap and boxing now with this Crawford and Canelo fight. Yes, he's going to make a shit ton of money for himself. But then what is he going to do, spending his time promoting, his own company, right? He's going to focus all this energy with, Canelo and Terrence Crawford when a big fight for the UFC gets announced, he's going to do it on an IG Live. And that's the thing that just mainly pisses me off. I just think that it's really annoying that, he's going to spend all this time and energy to a new company with TKO. Yes, I get it's a super fight. Terrence Crawford and Canelo. I'm very excited for that fight. I don't want to downplay of how big of a fight that is, but my problem, especially coming from a UFC fan, is he's going to spend all his time promoting this fight, getting his money, but he should really focus that energy and promote his own fucking company at the end of the day. Look at back in the day with Connor and Jose Aldo. Look at the promo when that fight was supposed to be built up, right? That got fans really tuned in. And now with this Marab, Sean O'Malley, all this stuff, all these big fights, they don't even have like either a storyline with it. They don't, put that money and energy to make the fight bigger than it actually should be. It's just a disgrace to see. And, I feel like if Dana White and, the UFC wants to kind of start changing these narratives until they get worse about, the UFC being complacent, I think, he should just start spending more time with the UFC, making better cards, figuring out a solution of how, what actually makes sense with the matchmaking, with the locations, etc. And then, once when he fixes that problem, then hell, I couldn't care what other stuff he needs to do. But yeah, I think that's just my overall issues with Dana White, doing this Canelo Crawford thing. But I will say though, with the Canelo Crawford fight, I'm very excited for it. I still have to think who I want to pick to win. I feel like Canelo might pull it off, but I don't know. That's for a different day, man. But if you guys like this video and want more videos like this, please hit the like, comment, and subscribe button. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.